Hey.
Good morning.
Hey, good morning. Hey, LaTonya.
Hey, LaTonya. How did the meeting with Alicia go?
Oh, pretty good.
Pretty good.
Yeah.
Does she have what she needs?
Yep.
There it is.
Morning, Erica.
Good morning, everyone.
Morning. Hey, Miss Cattell.
How are you?
Good, good. Hi, Eva. Well, while people are getting started, are still coming in the room. You know, we have a lot to talk about with LaTonya today, so we'll go ahead and get started. And let me just read a short introduction for her. And what we'll do is the same format as usual. We'll talk for a little bit, then pause for some questions, talk for a little bit more, and then pause around 10:50, 10:45, 10:50 for some final questions. So with us today, we're very fortunate to have LaTonya Tate, the executive director and founder of the Alabama Justice Initiative, AJI, which is based in Birmingham, Alabama. LaTonya is also a 2018 Soros Justice Fellow. She's a mother of a formerly incarcerated son and a retired probation and parole officer, formerly with the Florida Department of Corrections, where she worked for nearly a decade. So LaTonya, thank you for joining us today. Thank you for your work. And we'll get started with some of the questions. So when did your work start? And you're on mute. Yeah.
Hey, can everybody hear me?
Yep.
Hey, good morning to all, that has, taken out their busy schedule to come on, this great panel discussion. Thanks to Evan for inviting me. So my work actually got started in 2001, the day that my son was arrested and charged as a first-time offender with robbery, one at the age of 19. So that was the pipeline, to me, starting this journey. It was during that time that I was in the medical field. I always had wanted to be a nurse growing up and had the opportunity to go to Bevel State and become an LPN, and also worked in government, working in several hospitals. And then my last journey before I got into criminal justice, I worked at the health department. So it was during, that time my son was sentenced to a 20-year sentence, split 4 years to serve, which is a split sentence in the state of Alabama. And, being a mother that had never been in trouble, and I'm the oldest of three, it's four of us, and I'm the only girl, and I have brothers that are siblings. And we've never been in trouble. No more than like speeding tickets, come from a middle-class family, and never seen any of my uncles or aunts or anybody in my family, go to prison or anything. So all of this was like a shockwave, to me and my mom. Mm. And it was just, just to take the 20-year sentence with 4 years to serve. I was like, okay, my son will be out of prison in 4 years. But little did I know that when you are offered a split sentence in the state of Alabama, the judge has jurisdiction over you, which means that he could have, suspended his prison sentence and started my son on the 5 years probation that he had to, to follow. Right. But in the course of all of that, he ended up getting in trouble 8 months prior to him being released, which means they had to be reported back to the judge, but the judge had jurisdiction over him, and he revoked his split. So that was the first revocation. And so I learned all of this stuff, going through this journey. So this journey led me to go back to school and deter me from going back to my original plans of finishing my nursing degree and eventually become a nurse anesthetist. So that never happened. So I ended up going the journey of criminal justice and ended up with a degree in criminal justice, and then taking a job with the Florida Department of Corrections, working as a probation and parole officer. So my journey started in 2001. My son got arrested.
Wow. And how did you balance being responsive to him with sort of, you know, pursuing this interest in criminal justice then, and then your advocacy work now? I know that's a difficult position for a lot of mothers to be in, is you're responsive to your loved ones, in your case, you know, to your son, and then you're also doing advocacy work. And at first you were the probation officer. How did you balance both of all of those responsibilities?
Well, the balance came, you know, it was during the time when I got the job in Florida. I left Alabama, moved to Enterprise, and I worked in a little small town. It's called Defuniak Springs, Florida. And a lot of people are not familiar with Defuniak, but the way I, you know, familiarize that to people is, if you go to Destin, Florida, that county is called Walton County, and you have to go through Defuniak, you know, to get to the beach. So it was a 55-minute drive for me to drive from Enterprise to Florida, you know, for almost 10 years. But I did live in Florida for like a year. I lived in Freeport, but I just could never, you know, I couldn't adapt to it. But the balance came as I was the only Black female in a rural white town. And my coworker was the only African-American male. He had been with the department way over 20 plus years. So I had, you know, getting this job, you know, it gives you a lot of power. And the majority of my caseload were Caucasian individuals. And the Defuniak does, you know, have some Black people, but the population is more white than Blacks. So the balance came, you know, with me with that was, my son was sitting in prison when I actually took this job, and nobody knew that. So, you know, being the mother that I am, and going through what I went through, I would tell people, and I'd be very transparent. It was a very depressing time in my life for me, my mom, my whole family. This was like a shock wave. So, you know, a lot of times, a lot of people say you living physically, but you dying on the inside. So I felt like I was dying on the inside, because my 19-year-old son going into a whole world, you know, that I don't know anything about. We often see, you know, that on TV. So it was a lot of praying. You know, a lot of people, you know, standing with me and just going through. But God just really gave me, you know, the strength, you know, to endure this journey. And then when I'm taking the job, so taking the job, and the balance came, whereas I knew I had this power where I can inflict pain and trauma on other families. Or I could have been bitter and say, hey, I've seen people that was put on 5 years probation in Florida that was charged with robbery, armed robbery, like my son. And I could have been bitter and took that out on them. And say, you know, and that's when I learned that the unfairness, and the system is not fair. But I had to really look at these people like they were really individuals. Like, okay, my son, you know, this could have happened for my son, or, you know, during that time, but it just didn't. And I just could not, you know, travel in a mode of bitterness, because that was not going to help me. But I got balance in knowing that once my son was released, which I knew he was going to be released, I didn't want nobody to mistreat him. So the balance came in. I always told people that sat in front of me, I'm going to treat you like a human, but at the end of the day, I still have a job to do. And I always made this comment to people that I supervise. It's like you carry a child for 9 months and you birth this person. So you birthed a bad experience in your life. So it's going to be up to you to annihilate the experience. Just remember that I have a job to do. I have to report back to the courts when you're not doing, you know, things right. Or I can do things to keep you on the right track. So that's where the balance came in at, you know, not being bitter and giving those that I supervise, you know, the best re-entry possible.
When you think about that shift that you made from LPN, who wanted to be a nurse in the anesthesiology unit, to then doing community corrections, then you made another shift where you went from out of community corrections into your Soros Fellowship and kind of becoming full-time civic engagement advocacy work. And I just wondered if you could tell us a little bit about what were some of the shifts mentally or personally that you went through when you went from community corrections to being an advocate who's very much wanting to sort of transform the criminal justice system?
Well, it was, you know, when I went into probation and parole, I was way over in my 40s. I was probably like one or maybe like five, or one of the oldest people that was in my class. Had a great class of individuals that I, went through the academy. We was the first class to all pass the certification and become certified in the state of Florida, which was a glorious thing. So I knew that being in my 40s, I had everything like mapped out. I'm only do this job 10 years. I'm out. I'm not going to carry a gun and a badge the rest of my life. And I knew that God had more for me to do as far as like getting in the community, working with those that had been impacted by the system, and then just having that, that experience of seeing how the system flows from the inside out. So when I did retire, I had a beach cleaning business in Florida. I really was making more money cleaning beach houses on the weekend than I was supervising people that was on probation and parole. And it wasn't until when I transitioned and retired, I made the decision to leave. I moved to Montgomery. I left Enterprise, moved to Montgomery, and, just transitioning back, closer to home. But it wasn't until my son went back to prison on a technical violation, no new crime, just tech not following the rules, and the hearing officer recommended that he come back up in 3 years, right? And during that time, that was when Walter Scott was stopped for a traffic violation in South Carolina and was shot in the back. So I knew then, something hit me. And then, my son sitting in prison for 3 years with no tech, I'm like, I gotta do something. So I immediately kind of started like, looking for jobs in like with some nonprofits that were doing the work, and doors got closed in my face. And so I had to really just go back to what God had, spoke to my spirit. He was like, I'm going to use you to help set the captive free. So I had to go back to that and say, okay, Lord, what are you doing here? You don't want me to work for anyone. So then this is when a lot of things that happened to me, y'all, and this is real talk, seriously. Even when I got the job in Florida, my spirit was prompt to get up, go get on the computer, and bam, there the job was with the Florida Department of Correction. Same thing with the Soros Justice Fellowship. Ran across it, on Facebook, called some girlfriends of mine, said, look, I'm gonna go for this thing, fill out this thing. I want y'all to be my mentors and tweak my work and see how this sound. And I did that. I wrote the plan, for the Soros Justice Fellowship, gave it to my friends. They looked it over, said, it looks good to me, sent it up, and bam. Next thing I know, I'm getting a letter saying you be invited to, to the next phase to come to New York and interview. And being the second African-American woman from Alabama to ever win this fellowship. The first lady won it was in 2005. So that was real big for me. So this is where the transition, came. And it was during that time, when my son went back to prison, I couldn't even step feet. I was just in much prayer, just listening to, what God was, saying to me. And I wouldn't go see my son. I would not step a foot on the prison ground because he wouldn't allow me to do that. But when it was time for me to do it, then I made that entry. Right. But, and, some things was going on with my son that was in there. And, I'm real transparent. And I say this, he, what we see in the prison day, he got addicted to synthetic marijuana while he was in there. And that was like a big shocker, to me. And I had to deal with that aftermath, right. Even coming back out of prison and then going back on a second parole violation because he, had this problem. So, yes, just keeping it real with y'all.
Yeah. And, when you think about the things you just said, it sounds like you were a member of many different communities, whereas there was a faith community that you were part of as far as people that would pray with you. When you were a correctional officer, I'm sure you had some people in your unit who you trusted more than others and watched your back if there was something violent taking place or concerning. And then as you become an activist and an advocate, you have people that have shared resources and have watched your back in that sense. And I just wonder, so you're in a space where you have deep relationships with communities that may not always talk to each other. Mm-hmm. And today we have a big conversation among some activists around reform of the prison system versus defunding, or diversionary programs versus abolition. And I just wondered, if you think about people in the faith communities and the law enforcement community, what do they need in order to avoid feeling threatened by that conversation that activists are having? Does that question make sense?
Yeah, and I think we are at a pivotal point where that needs to be discussed, because what I see, being a former probation and parole officer, an officer that carried a gun, carried a badge, where I had the authority to issue a warrant on a person and, immediately take them into custody. That works hand in hand with law enforcement, where they have to get a warrant, where we don't need a warrant. Being a probation and parole officer, when somebody is on probation and parole, as the officer that's supervising that person, you have the right to search that person's property, their persons, their home, or go there when you get ready, but not like disrupt the home, but only like, the common areas in the room that person sleeps in. But I really truly think that that's a conversation that the law enforcement community needs to have, along with corrections community, need to have, and get and really just dive into what are some evidence-based practices that we need to, start going towards. And when I see the things, when we see, what happened to George Floyd, what happened to Jacob Blake, what happened to Rashard Brooks over in Atlanta, when I learned that he was on supervised probation, and the reason that he ran from the police because he was scared and he knew that he would go, to jail and be arrested, because the probation officer, once the arrest came, they were going to get a hit that he had been arrested, and it's going to start, a violation on him. But to literally shoot somebody that's fleeing from you, that's not acceptable. I didn't learn that in the academy. And I know these other people in the law enforcement community know that that's not the first line of defense that you were taught to do. If a person is fleeing from you, you don't use a gun on them. You don't shoot into, a crowd of people, because you're responsible, for if that bullet hits, a person that it wasn't meant for. So those type of things, what I'm seeing in the law enforcement community, and then the abolition side. And then when I hear the community talking about defund the police and divert funds back into the community, we need those funds directed back into the community for good community. I just want to see policing go back to what I saw when I was growing up. We knew the police that was on the beat. We knew every beat officer, and they can come into the community and have this real conversation with us. So I would like to see funds put back into the community, start social service program, open up community centers, and people get to know, the law enforcement community, so that we can get that trust back. So we really need some good evidence-based practices. And then people like me, I would love to consult, with agencies and tell you, what you're doing is totally just unacceptable. I'm gonna speak out against it, because I'm for what's right, and it's totally wrong, to what we've witnessed, during these crucial times.
And I want to, hear more about the work at Alabama Justice Initiative, but I kind of want to lay the ground for it really quick. So the Obama and Trump administrations, they disagree on many things, right? But the Department of Justice under Eric Holder and under Attorney General Barr, they both of those departments of justice have agreed that Alabama's prisons are the worst in the country. And both of those departments have written memos that are hundreds of pages long and use very strong language that suggests outrage when they look at our prison system. Yet there doesn't seem to be mass outrage among Alabamians. Am I missing something? Is there outrage on a mass level that I've somehow missed? Where is the outrage and the anger?
Well, I don't think you missed anything, Evan. I just think that, when we see the division, and when we see, the communities, and what often gets me is what is really happening here is we see, people that are these Christians, and we are known here as a Bible Belt state, right? And when we see what we see, I often, say, how can people that attend church every Sunday not see and the DOJ laid that report out, just, it wasn't a hit or a miss. It was laid out. And it's no way that you can ignore that. And we'll say that we are, faith leaders and Christians, and why the faith community has not come forward in an outpouring of why the legislation has failed to do something about this report. And then the governor formed the study group, and she just shut the voices of those that these issues are affecting. So I'm a proponent of those closest to the problem are the solution solvers. So it's no way that you can continue to have these conversations about what is transpiring, with the prison system, with parole, without inviting those that these issues are affecting. You have to have that voice there, and you cannot keep trying to silence that voice, where you cannot have these people at the table. So I think it's like a miscarriage. It's like a doctor. You go to the doctor, and the doctor diagnose you, or you going to the doctor and they say, look, I got high blood pressure, or they trying to just assume you got high blood pressure and say, hey, I want to put you on some medicine, but you haven't diagnosed me for that. So that's just like a miscarriage of healthcare, and that's what we see in here. And I think what needs to happen in that instance is, faith leaders, the governor, the legislators, they need to hear the stories from people that these issues are affecting. We've had a lot of COVID deaths. We've had people dying, from the hands of brutality from correctional officers. We've had people dying from overdoses of drugs, and it's been an outcry and an outpouring. The people of Alabama are, the people that are in power are still turning a deaf ear to this. So I just think that you're not missing anything. It's just the people that are in power are missing. They don't want to hear it. I just think in order for us to really come together on this, it's going to take the effort of all grassroots organizations, all people that say that you're Bible believers, to come together. Because when you look at what's happening, in the prison system, and the governor wants to rectify this issue, building 3 new mega prisons, it makes no sense when you have people sitting in prison in their 70s and their 80s that are sitting in there under the Habitual Offender Act. 3 strikes you out. That law needs to be abolished, right? Then when I look at Sean Worsley, the veteran that was coming through Gordo, Alabama, and had legal medical marijuana for Arizona, and it's not legalized here. We need sentencing reform. And then you want to send this man who has post-traumatic stress disorder, brain trauma, just all type of issues where he needs this care from his family. But you think that the proper place was to give him a 5-year prison sentence in the DOC. It makes no sense to me. So these are the things that we have going on in our prison system. We need to clean up with what we have. We need to clean up the system. And I guess we're going to talk about defund, sending the funds back and, into the community. Send some of that budget that you got in the Department of Corrections back into the community. So when we look at the things that's transpiring in our prison system, we don't need 3 new prisons. We just need to work with what we got and get some laws on the book, that's going to give the people the relief that they need.
Right. And you are working to push us in that direction through Alabama Justice Initiative. Mm-hmm. You have 3 main programs: your Reimagine Justice Institute, your Parole Education Preparation Project, mm-hmm. and then the Alabama Summit on Reimagining Justice. Mm-hmm. And I was just wondering if you could tell us a little bit about what those projects are doing currently, and what your long-term vision is for those projects. And then once you do that, we'll pause for some questions.
Well, the Alabama Justice Initiative, we focus on, like Evan said, those 3 main initiatives. The Alabama Summit on Reimagining Justice is a summit that we hosted, last year, and then we came back with it this year, which was a very successful event. We got a lot of positive feedback, on the event. I partnered with Legal Action Center, who actually did all the back office work, all the technical work on it. So I'm grateful, for them. We had some really, really robust conversations, and it was a great summit. And I can get the recording sent over to, all that's interested in it. Then we also, God gave me a vision like a year ago, and I happened to, be partnering with the ACLU doing this work, and, talk to their policy person about it. And it was just a hit. The minute I started talking about it, they were on board. So I'm grateful that they funded a Reimagining Justice Fellowship, which is an advocacy organizing fellowship that teaches those that are formerly incarcerated directly impact the people in the community, people to be trained to organize and in advocacy and learn, you know, the legislative process of how we need to move policy, you know, in the state of Alabama, and though they can actually go back into their communities and train up the community. Then we also we're launching a parole education preparation project, which is a replication of the parole prep project out of New York. So I'm grateful to be partnering with Michelle Lewin, who actually is the ED of the parole preparation project, and Jose Sadana, who is over RAP, releasing age in prison people. Jose Sadana is a man who committed a violent crime in New York, and now he's the ED of that organization, RAP, which focus on, you know, the aging population and elder parole. So I'm grateful to have, you know, those people working, you know, in that space. And then another initiative, you know, that we also do, we do what's called participatory defense, which is a model just taken off in the U.S. And it was actually introduced by a former Soros Justice fellow, Raj Dejive. So participatory defense is a model that those that are allegedly charged with a crime, we work with the family to get the best outcome. We provide court support. We help them. We get the best outcome. We work with the attorney. You know, we get in the community and just get the best outcome, because we know that working in the community and getting the best outcome for individuals, so we can keep them out of jail and prison, keep them in the community. So we've been real successful, you know, with that initiative as well. We've had 7 people parole up under just doing participatory defense, using one portion of the model, which is a social bio, where we humanize the person, because in Alabama, you cannot appear for your parole hearing. It's only an institution jacket that the 3-board panel member has. So we present that person as if they were there through a social bio, which means we add pictures. We put what their accomplishments in prison. We put, you know, their home plan, you know, letters from, you know, people in the community, letters from like the warden, you know, the correctional staff, you know, to get the best outcome for this person to come back. So we've been successful getting people that have been charged with felony murder, you know, out. People that was charged with robbery, one which is a violent crime in Alabama. So we've been very successful at doing that. Then we had the opportunity also this year to get involved in civic engagement, and just grateful to Alabama Forward, the Alabama Alliance, and the organization that entrusted, you know, Alabama Justice to get involved. You know, and a lot of organizations knew that we had to get more boots on the ground. So we enjoyed doing it. I enjoyed getting in the community and learning this, and wanting to scale up, you know, doing the civic engagement process. So those are the things that we focus on. So the organization centers to lift the voices of directly formerly incarcerated people, to elevate their voices, and to train them up to be advocates, and moving that way. What we see sweeping the nation, when you see laws changing in other states, those things are being done by people that are affected, you know, by issues that are affecting them in the community.
Thank you. So we're gonna take some questions, and folks, I'm happy to ask them, but I don't want to, you know, you're also encouraged to, if you want to ask yourself, you can certainly ask it directly to her. So we had one question: is AJI connected to EJI? And so I told them y'all are different organizations, but have y'all ever collaborated or worked together on anything just yet?
No, I haven't had the pleasure of working with Brian Stevenson. Brian actually sat on Open Society's board, which is the organization where I got my fellowship to. So we are not connected. So I have not had the pleasure of meeting Brian Stevenson as of yet, because I was doing a lot of traveling with the fellowship. A lot of people was inviting me to speak based on my experience with probation and parole, and I just have not had the opportunity or the time to meet him. So we're not connected in that fashion.
Yes, ma'am. We had a second question from your perspective. Where should people who want to support some of the things you know, the goals you mentioned, where should we focus first? If we're not working at AJI, if we're not a justice impacted person, so we don't have the experience of having been incarcerated, but we do want to generally support a more fair, just, humane Alabama, where should we be focusing our energy as a priority?
Well, I think the energy and the priority should be around getting involved in seeing policies change, because we can have this conversation, all day, every day, 365 days a year. But if we don't see the policies in Alabama change, we're not going to get anywhere. So I think people should, focus on getting with organizations like myself, a grassroots style, because what we're seeing is we're seeing a great united front, in Alabama in a long time. And we have the support of the organizations like the Southern Poverty Law Center, the ACLU, Alabama Appleseed, which let the people that's impacted by these issues lead the way, and they support us in that manner. So I think if people really wanted to get involved, is to lash on to, the campaigns that we're pushing. Like we're pushing a campaign that's called Communities Not Prison. And that centers around, trying to stop the build of the 3 new mega prisons, so people can get involved that way. And we realize that a lot of policy, I'm gonna go back to what I said, policy has to be, you have to get some policy passed. So you can participate with us with Lobby Day. Hopefully we'll be able to go into the State House this year. We had a great lobby day last year. So those are some of the ways that people can participate. And, you can find me, on the web, alajustice, alajustice.org, and just look and see, what initiatives that you think that you may want to be involved in. And we need volunteers for the Parole Education Prayer Project. And that gives people some experience in learning how the parole process go in Alabama. So we have some things for people to get involved in.
And two more questions. So you mentioned the importance of having people who are directly impacted by the justice system telling their stories. And then so often the policymakers who we want to hear those stories, they have a perception of the people telling those stories that sometimes limits their ability to be emotionally impacted by what they have to say. How do we help those legislators have a different perception of the person telling them the story about their lived experiences?
Well, and storytelling is so important, because it wasn't until earlier this year that I actually had an organization that supports my work, forward.us, come down, and they sent a film crew here, and they filmed, my story, followed me around for 5 days and just put my story. I was like, they did a campaign called, I was the second family that they featured. So just going, into the legislation when we did Lobby Day, and going around speaking to the legislators that were receptive to listening, a lot of them, see, people don't realize that when these laws are made, they're made off of fear. They're made because this is what your base want to hear, your people in your community, have, what we see that's going on in the world today, hate and racism and white supremacy, systemic racism, all this stuff is still being pushed. But these laws are based off of fear, because I'm just like, how can you make a law when you have never walked in some of these people's shoes? So I just say storytelling is so important. And it's real important for us to get the stories of individuals out, to move. When I think about, and I'm gonna give people this scenario. When I think about Alice Marie Johnson, if you don't know who she is, when you get a chance to look her up, she's the lady that President Trump, she was in federal prison in Aliceville, and he pardoned her. That story got her from a national organization that I am a part of, the National Council for Incarcerated Girls, Formerly Incarcerated Women and Girls, which is headed by a formerly incarcerated woman. And this organization is all formerly incarcerated individuals and families. So if it wasn't for people like Andrea James and those people highlighting Alice Marie Johnson, President Trump would have never knew who she was. Kim Kardashian would have never known
and you
who
said,
she is.
Exactly. So you're saying people know Kim Kardashian, but the reason Kim Kardashian knew of her story is the work of that network that you just named, right?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So making sure that those stories have a platform, basically, have filmmakers and and then
and let me just say one
yes,
more
ma'am.
thing to that. And I don't want people to get so, what we want to do when you're doing this work, always keep in mind, keep the voices of the people that's impacted center. Even though Kim Kardashian used her platform to get, Alice Marie Johnson elevated more, she's getting that credit for that. And she didn't do that work. So that's what happens when you start getting like people of influence involved. I always pay homage to the people on the ground that's in the trenches doing this work. Yeah, her platform was able to elevate this story more, but they took away from the people who really did the work. And that's what we don't want to see happen, is take away from the people that are down on the ground working, you know, tooth and nails with no funding, you know, just the resources that they got. And we don't want to do that. We want the storytelling to be told, even if you connected to a star. You know, I can go back and talk about the Meek Mill situation, you know, with his situation with probation. You know, I have a lot of people that, you know, we in touch with these families. Everybody want to tweet Meek Mills and Kim Kardashian. And I had love, that's not the way, people. It has to come from you, because I'm going to tell you, being in the South, they don't care anything about Kim Kardashian or Meek Mills. They want to hear from you.
Right. And then one last question on for this segment of the questions. So we have lots of people on the call right now who work in different spaces. The person who asked this question works for around reproductive rights and women's healthcare. And so, like, say for her, for example, what role does someone who works full-time on advocacy on an issue base that is not centered on the criminal justice systems, or on being, you know, quality of life for formerly incarcerated people, or reentry, if that's not their bread and butter issue for their organization, how can they and their organization play a role in pushing for transformative change?
Well, and it's very important, you know, and don't undermine your work and what you're doing. We think about the rate of women that's entering prison. Women are the highest number of individuals that's in the prison system that's incarcerated, and a lot of these people are going to prison pregnant. Reproductive justice is so important. One of my comrades over in Atlanta, there's a 2019 Soros Justice Fellow by the name of Pamela Wynn. Her organization is called Restore Her. Pam was sentenced to a 5-year, 72 months in the federal prison. She learned she was pregnant. She was 6 weeks pregnant, you know, when she was doing the intake process, and the prison wasn't ready for that. They wasn't built for, you know, they wasn't built for that. And in you know, learning that she was pregnant, she lost a baby in there. She miscarried. She went through a lot of trauma. So your work is very important. It plays a very important role, because a lot of, you know, organizations have doula projects. They have the birthing projects, you know, that are in prison. So the work is very important. It plays a very, very important role, you know, in criminal justice reform.
Yes, ma'am. And, you know, we talked earlier, and I said I wish we had, you know, 2-3 hours to kind of, just because we could keep going, but I want to be mindful of us ending around 10:50 and taking our last section of questions from the group then. But just to for the last group that I have, I did have some other ones, but I really want to make sure that we don't leave without talking about the things that give you hope and inspiration. Because, you know, when you're dealing with these systems, when you've had the personal experiences you've had, and when you're in a position that you're in right now, where you're really having to nurture lots of people, then it's even more important that you are connected to hope and the inspiration and things that keep you fueled up. And I think it's helpful for us who are working in different lanes of justice-oriented work to just hear more about, you know, what keeps each other motivated and inspired. So for you, which sources of training and mentorship have been the most meaningful to you in this advocate phase of your career? Or if you want to go before that part to, you know, the earlier phases, that's fine too.
Well, you know, coming out of, you know, corrections and out of probation and parole, and transforming over into, you know, the role of activism, and then winning the Soros Fellowship opened up a lot of portals for me, because I got to meet a lot of people in different areas that's been doing this work a long time. A lot of the elders that's been doing this work, like Susan Burton, Norris Henderson, Dorsey Nunn, Kenneth Glasgow, just a whole lot of people that's been doing this work. Vivian Nixon, the Formerly Incarcerated Convicted People's Movement is an organization that's made up of over 50, you know, human rights organizations. Like my organization is attached to that. And a lot of these people are formerly incarcerated and have great organizations out there. You know, like I can talk about Susan Burton, and that gives me hope when I go and I being somebody that came out of corrections. And it wasn't easy breaking into this, you guys, because I came from a system that's still affecting people. So it's almost like, it was like a trust factor. You going and people looking at your side eye, this lady is a former, police, they call the POs police, and
Right.
building that trust, I had to earn these people's trust. And when people really seeing the genuine, that I really was genuine about my advocacy work, because I had to say, look, I'm the mother of a formerly incarcerated person. So, this has happened to my son. I found myself often had to defend myself, in spaces, but I've earned that respect now,
Right.
from these leaders. So, just going into this work, and I just recommend, people to support, the families, people that are affected, because this is some heavy work. People are, families are just disappointed when you see the stuff what's going on in our parole system that has just taken just a deep dive, just a deterrence from not paroling individuals. So, giving it support. People need support. People need to know that people are out here supporting them. We've scored a victory, with the parole board. It's a small victory, but we counted a victory with the present executive director being Charlie Graddick is leaving at the end of the month. So we still got a long way to go. So this gives me joy and hope, every day we pressing toward the mark. And I really believe with more people coming, forth, and more organizations getting involved, and people, really taking these issues serious. And I often tell people this, even though you may not be directly impacted by the system, but you're a taxpayer, in the state of Alabama, and your money is being used towards the criminal justice system, what we have now. And your money is going to be used if the governor gets these 3 prisons out the ground for the next 30 years, which the state of Alabama will not own the prisons. They're going to be built by private industry at $88 million a year for the next 30 years. So do the math, that's $2.6 billion. So we're going to be in debt. Your kids are going to be affected. I'm going to be affected. My granddaughter is going to be affected. Her kids are going to be affected. So do we really want this? So I really want people to start honing in. I mean, you may not have people directly that's in jail or prison, or maybe never been in jail, but as a taxpaying citizen, you have a right, to push against this prison propaganda.
Are you a part of any coalitions or networks here in Alabama that you want to mention, and you would encourage other people to know about? Or are there, let's just, in terms of coalitions and groups here based here in the state? I know there are lots of national groups that you're a part of, but things that are locally, what are some of the networks you're a part of?
Yeah, we have the Alabamians for Fair Justice, which is a coalition that we formed last year that has the ACLU, Alabama Appleseed, Southern Poverty Law Center, my organization, Faith in Action, just a whole lot of grassroots organizations, Arise Alabama. So it's Alabamians for Fair Justice. So if people want to know what we're doing, just go out there and get on that website and sign up, to receive, newsletters from there. So a lot of the things that we're doing, even around the prison, the community is not prison, even though Alabama Justice Initiative is leading that campaign, but we're partnering, with the coalition and others that we're going to be launching the website soon. And people can actually go on there and partner, with us to push back against these prisons being built.
And that group includes some of the more well-known groups that we know of, as far as Appleseed, TOPS, ACLU. Who are some of the groups that are closer to the ground that we may not know their names, but you think they're doing work that really deserves us knowing more about them? Well, I don't want to say deserve, but just groups that you would like us to know more about, who we may not have heard their name outside of hearing you mention it today. Who are some of those groups? Where are they in the state, and what are they doing?
Well, you have people like the Offender Alumni Association, which is headed up by Deborah Daniels and Dina Dickerson, both are formerly incarcerated women. You have the Second Chance, oh God, Carmon Owens is his name. Even Alabama Cure with Rosemary, with Miss Rosemary, Deborah Offer, Pat Vandermeer. So you have those groups as well. Like I said, along with Arise, you have Faith in Action. And those are some of like the key groups that I could say, you know, that are on the ground. And we want more people to get on the ground with us, you know,
Right.
doing with these efforts.
Yeah, I hadn't heard. So you said the Offender Alumni Association, then
Mm-hmm.
Second Chance, and it might be something else in the name. Omar
Yeah, I
Owens.
can't think of Carmon Owens right. Yeah, it's Carmon Owens. He's a formerly incarcerated gentleman who actually did probably about 30 years in prison.
Okay.
And he works
What's
a lot with Alabama Cure and Offender Alumni Association. So
is
Offender
it?
Alumni Association focus a lot on direct services. They do a lot of family support. So that's the mechanism that they operate in over there.
And in terms of young people or emerging leaders and groups, they may not have a formal organization right now. You know, but they're doing a lot of volunteer work. They're working with you. They're working with some of the groups you just named. But you look at them and you see a reason to be hopeful about the work continuing 5 years, 10 years down the road. Are there any of those younger folks that you like to mention, or those emerging leaders that you'd like to put on our radar?
Well, I can talk about the emerging leaders that's in the fellowship. You have people like Unique Dunstan, who's fighting against the Confederacy monuments, you know, in Abbeville to come down. I failed to mention this other young lady too, Camille Bennett, who is up in North Alabama, Project Say Something. So definitely she fights racial justice issues and very, very dynamic, awesome woman of color who's leading a great organization up in Florence, Alabama. So we have Nakisha Tilton, who is a part of the fellowship. We have Terrell Simmons, who's been on the ground, you know, moving around issues, you know, organizing with, he's out of Mobile. And we just have an array of people that's in the fellowship. Jason Bishop, who's out, you know, in Montgomery. These are the 10 people that we're nurturing now are some serious emerging leaders and are ready to, you know, just get on the ground running and get back in their communities and just, you know, get people trained up. So I would definitely say these young people that we're dealing with, you know, right now in the fellowship are some very great emerging leaders. And so we're going to be putting their pictures and their bios up on the website, so you can actually go out there and see, you know, who's in the fellowship now, who actually kicked off the fellowship, you know, in the beginning. So just, you know, just some people to be watching out for.
Yep. And then we had someone ask if we could just be sure to get the right name for, is it Kumar or Omar Owens?
His name is Carmon, Carmone, Carmon Owens.
Okay. And then is it Alabama?
It's called Second Chance Lifesavers, y'all. I'm sorry. I just thought about it. Second Chance Lifesavers, but his name is Carmon Owens, Carmone Owens, Carmon Owens.
And then that other group, is it Alabama Cure, like cure the virus, or care?
Yeah,
like,
Alabama Cure, yes.
Okay, good.
Mm-hmm.
So then before I shut up and my last two are, how should people stay in touch with you and stay updated on your work?
Just go to alajustice, alajustice.org. We have a Facebook page. Alabama Justice has a Facebook page. We're on Twitter. We're creating our Instagram page. I'm on Facebook as LaTonya Tate, LaTonya Tate. You can find me on Facebook because I'm often posting, you know, things, you know, on my social media. So we're blessed, you know, to have people coming on volunteering, you know, to start taking over the communications part, you know, or the organization posting. So we'll be, you know, putting updates, but that's where you can find me, you know, at, and especially like on my website, alajustice.org. And we, you know, have a way you can send a message and, you know, keep in touch and communicate that way. And
how can people support your work? What kind of support are you even looking for?
Well, you know, to be honest with you, we've been blessed to like get a little funding pots for our project, but we are looking for general operating funds so we can actually bring people on staff. I have some amazing people that have been, you know, with me and just tagged on to me, like Veronica Johnson, who is my deputy director, Unique Dunstan, who I mentioned. She is her organization is Project Say Something, but she's learning, so she's over here with us as our organizer. I have some more people that's coming on board to volunteer, to play different roles in administration, communication. So we're looking for portals to open up where we can be, get support for general operating budget. And also we're going to be putting a donate button up on our website where people can donate as well. So we have the prison campaign, the Community's Not Prison campaign is going to be launching, and it'll be a donate button on there for people to donate to the campaign, because we realize that we got to get organizers on the ground, because this is a widespread campaign due to the 3 different areas that the governor are trying to build in, one being Tallahassee, Bibb, and Escambia County. So we got to get people on the ground, and we got to run this campaign like we run a political campaign, like we run it for office, to get the word out and get people, mobilizing around it.
Thank you. You're connected with some great national partners. You mentioned Dorsey and Raj with the Participatory Defense Network. And so I'm just excited to be in contact with you, and then to hear about the people that here, from Camille, Bennett, and Florence to all of the folks you've been talking about today. It's encouraging to know that we have newer voices emerging, and we have people emerging with work that are not in the same places where we already have some groups. And I think that's really important. And just thank you for your genuine commitment over time, and continuing to prioritize building up other leaders as well. And I look forward to doing whatever I can to continue to support you. So just in closing, does anyone have any final questions for LaTonya?
I do. Hold on, I don't want the video on this though. Am I on video?
You could just turn off the camera. There you go. And then unmute it.
Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Okay. Can you send us a list of, first of all, sister, your presentation was phenomenal. And
Thank you.
And I really hope that even if it's just in terms of sending you a donation, that all of us will support your work.
Thank you.
Evan, can you send us a list of those organizations that she worked with, that she mentioned,
Yes.
the directions, and because I didn't know all that stuff existed. So it's real. I did. So it's really heartwarming to hear about your hard work.
Thank you.
And I really wish you well. I pray good things for you and for the people that you serve. Here's my question. Oh, you're more than welcome. Here's my question. You mentioned defund the police. And if you could explain a little bit more about what you see that is, because to be honest, my mind goes to a concept where there are no police officers and everything is just community-based neighborhood watch kinds of things. So
Right.
is the language wrong? Could that be turning people off, just those words? Because when you hear it explained, it's a well-needed, phenomenal concept. But like, I know there's a city in New Jersey that literally did it. And they had community-based law enforcement. The officers even were paid, some of the officers were paid to live in those communities that they paroled. So explain that to me and give me an example of how it would work. And do you think that defund the police is kind of language that might turn people off?
Well, I move with a lot of abolitionists, and I respect their work. And with me being formerly, in law enforcement, and the things that I've been able to witness, with the naked eye, the shooting of Jacob Blake, Rashard Brooks, and the things with George Floyd, the things that we see even with Breonna Taylor. And I know that some of the practices that people are using is out of fear. So I'm not going to divert and push away from defund the police. I think that the language is the perfect language. It's just that they need to have this conversation, with the community. If we go back and we look at our indigenous brothers and sisters and the restorative practices and the things they've done. I was just talking to somebody about this on yesterday. You know, I recall growing up and I was like, everybody knew everybody on the street. We all knew it was a close-knit neighborhood. You knew everybody in the neighborhood. So if you did something, by the time you made it home, your mama knew about it, right? So that's community to me. And I clearly understand, you know, where they're going with it. And so what we've seen, you know, in the wake of all this, we've seen a lot of the resources taken out of the community, a lot of the community recreation centers closed. Like I can remember on my grandmother's street, I can just walk down the sidewalk and it was a park right there with it, monkey bars, handlebars, you know, the swing set. So, you know, all of that, right? So I think what it is when people hear defund the police, I think it's like people get scared. Are they really gonna get rid of the police? And as you stated, it could be done. It could be done in a fashion where I don't think that, you know, a lot of the polices that are, you know, taking these jobs want that, because a lot of them are coming in already, you know, in that mindset with white supremacy practices. So we got to find a way to break through all of that. You know, I can't help but to think about the things that I've seen, even just this latest, I think it was probably about 3 weeks ago, when a young man trying to break up a fight in Texas and the police officer arrived on the scene. The first thing you do is pull your gun out. I mean, for what? So all of these are things that they have been taught to fear, you know, people of color, you know, our, you know, black and brown people. So I think the language is perfect language. I just think that the community and the people, just when they think about that, oh, they're going to get rid of the police department. No, we're not trying to we're trying to bring back community policing. And I'm gonna give you guys this lady to look up. Her name is Miriam Kaba. Miriam Kaba was a Soros Justice Fellow too, and she does beautiful work around of abolition work. She was responsible for getting a young lady released on bail. Crystal Kaiser was her name. I think it was up in Wisconsin, a young lady that had been sex trafficked, and they had like a big bond on her. So Miriam, they raised the money to actually bail her out of jail. But Miriam does work just basically what you just mentioned, you know, defunding the police and the community, you know, taking charge and basically, you know, holding people accountable for their actions. So, you know, I think when people say defund the police, is the community want to be able to get involved and try to solve their own, you know, their own issues. So I'm all, you know, for that, you know, when it comes to that, because I think a lot of this stuff can be solved. You know, when I think about, you know, the things that's going on, and when we get the police, you know, on the scene, the first thing they do, they come there, they all hyped up, and it
LaTonya, you still with us? Well, you know, thank you for thankfully you were able to hold out to the very end on our call today. And so y'all, I'm going through now through the chat, and I'll clean the list up of the different websites that I put in the chat during the call, and some of the names she mentioned, and I'll send them out to you. And I also owe you some notes from last Thursday as well, so we'll get those out now. And then if you see some names that are not mentioned in the email that I send, if you can mail me, then I'll add them and just send an amended version of the list out to everyone. Okay, so on Thursday, our speaker is actually with us now. Our guest, Anna, and I'm so paranoid about mispronouncing your last name, but so yeah, can you spare me, teach me, so that Thursday tomorrow I know how to say it like I've been saying it for a long time, because I don't want to mess it up. I think a friend of mine called you Anna Delia. Yep. Will you say it?
The last name
Espino. Okay. Ana Delia Espino. So Ana Delia Espino is the executive director of the Alabama Immigrant Justice Coalition, and we're gonna talk tomorrow about her work and kind of have a similar conversation, talk about some personal experiences, as well as some of the work that they're doing there with AIJC. We hope y'all can join us, and I really look forward to that conversation, Ana. Thank y'all. Talk to you soon.
Thank you, Evan.
All right.